The first Ghost in the Shell film went down as a classic anime abroad. It sold over 1 million copies in the United States alone. There's a potential to build some momentum there, with a sequel that uses the new funds to bring something ambitious to the screen with amazing animation that expands the world. Technically, Ghost in the Shell 2, Innocence, achieves those things in its own way. However, as a sequel, it has problems that we need to talk about. Since the original film was released in 1995, we've seen TV shows, games, and more manga. It became a franchise. The audience was booming, even in Japan. By now, people would have an idea of what Ghost in the Shell is. While each entry could approach the world in its own way, it all fits together, and the audience now would have expectations. Innocence was planning to break those. Released 9 years after the first film, it was a bit late for a sequel, but there was still anticipation. Enough anticipation for international investors to put money into the film. It would be a rare opportunity for the studio Production IG. The sky was the limit. They had 5-fold the funds of the original movie, with no tight deadlines. Although with that kind of money, they would need to show results. Herein lies the first obstacle, Mamoru Oshii. As the director of the first film, he took some credit for its success, and after that first film's release, he was offered the sequel by IG, but rejected it. Instead, Oshii chose to work on projects outside the animation world. When he was wrangled into a Ghost in the Shell pitch for a second time, with a chance that someone else could direct it if he didn't, Oshii accepted it, but delayed the production to finish his prior stuff. It's now 2001, and Ghost in the Shell 2 is ready. But here's the issue. Oshii had a kind of mentality where the first movie he'd make as an adaptation would be fairly faithful and try to stay within the world. But the second time he does that, he kind of becomes more enamored with his own tastes, and it will go off the beaten track. And this time, Oshii was both the director and writer. Oh no, the investors must have shrieked. Expect characters who only talk in philosophical quotes, and a lot of old men. And sure, that's fine for the greying men in the audience. I don't know if that's going to be a crowd pleaser. While Oshii said audience expectations, no, betray them. Don't do what they expect, give them something that could exceed all their expectations. Rather than repeating what they've already seen, making a similar movie would be a failure in the end. Still, one of the questions that the sequel would have to explore is what happened to the Major, after that quite dramatic turn at the end of the last film. Motoko is the franchise's main character after all, she's the staple. And now she's rogue? There's something there to explore emotionally. Well, instead of addressing that, Oshii essentially writes her out. That was his idea, to remove her as the protagonist, separating it from the original film and the author's sequel manga. That's not to say Innocence doesn't follow Shiro's manga. It takes core concepts and fragments from all over it, weaving it into something new. The movie becomes a detective story, which at its heart is really about Batou's loneliness, following the loss of the Major. Scene 20 represents that best. It involves Batou's after hours, showing us a glimpse into his life outside Section 9, taking cues from the original Blade Runner. Deckard's apartment was a character of its own, a secluded, cluttered place full of bygone memories. It was dimly lit, noir. Even the view from the balcony revealed a great deal about Deckard's lifestyle. Batou's apartment seems mundane in comparison. It's not full of drama or women. Scene 20 is silent, with only Gabriel, Batou's dog, to keep him company. Batou goes out of his way to buy Gabriel pedigree food, preparing it with more energy than he uses to make anything for himself. This in itself provides us with insight in how he's mourning his former partner. He's reclusive, stuck in a routine where Gabriel is his only friend. Animation Obsession wrote a great article about the sequence, highlighting the quiet moments really shine in Innocence. The familiarity of the scene makes it a little less alien for the audience. Batou's only real connection to humanity is his pet. The rest of the time he's some kind of cyborg super soldier. Although the film is written in such a way where that general audience is going to be alienated either way. It's full of detached characters who speak in riddles, as they slowly walk from scene to scene, with each providing a new clue to help them solve the mystery. Although the case isn't complex. Sometimes the clues are only mentioned in passing during the transition between locations, so it's not really a mystery you're supposed to solve. You're at the mercy of the film to guide you there, well, at least at first. So it's up to the film's visuals to keep you engaged. The world has changed since the last film. It's just not as sexy anymore, As the director said, Blade Runner is unavoidable for these types of stories, but Innocence is a rusty looking film full of shades of amber and grime. While there are these flashes of neon flair, it's moved past that veneer. It can't completely let go of Blade Runner though, but stylistically it's become something a little different, something referred to as Chinese Gothic. They wanted a dramatic change in worldview, involving the switch from the old guard. After a decade, Hiromasa Ogura is no longer the art director. It's now Kusamori, who's taken on the role, whose experience with the digital world would be paramount in capturing everything. First, the crew went location scouting in New York, which led to the idea of focus on Gothic structures, which the team added a bunch of Chinese decorations to. The world of Innocence feels hollow and dying. There's a contrast between the sterile, ultra-modern setting and the antique interiors. The cars in the first film were sci-fi, now they're these sort of retro 1950s American style. That's Oshii's taste coming out. Despite how these cars look, they are hand-drawn. They use CG wireframes as reference to draw over, but perhaps they drew them a little too well. Nevertheless, CGI plays a vital role in defining the world aesthetic, which in itself is alien and uncanny. If the story lacks familiarity, then the visuals certainly aren't going to bring it to you. They were pushing the Oshii layout system to its natural endpoint. The scale of the locations are expanded with more detail crammed into the frame than you can see on a CRT back then. Now the 2D staff didn't want to do that mix, it sounded like a pain in the ass, but Oshii has always been interested in using digital tools. They had the money, but the question is how would they achieve it? IG had to build their CGI and digital departments up. The scale they wanted would also take months to render out. Welcome to the brave new world of digital art. By the 2000s, most anime movies were still only using a small portion of CGI. Take House Moving Castle, that's maybe 15%. Innocence was looking to use up to 30% CGI within the movie, including entire backgrounds. You might as well call them sets. There are 5 sequences in the movie where they create digital locations to place these 2D characters within. Like the opening sequence, the first-person view through the alley is like a ghost floating through existence, trying to capture the seedy atmosphere of the story. The set was extended beyond what could be seen to maintain the feeling of a living world. There wouldn't be a frame where you could glimpse something in the distance. That felt off. To create the world of Innocence, it wasn't simply a case of rendering 3D objects, but painting them. The art department drew textures, sometimes creating hundreds per scene, which were often projected onto the backgrounds frame by frame. It was not enough to look good, but the 2D and 3D worlds have to match. Conversations took place between the digital department, the art department, and the animation department, as they experimented to find the best method. A culmination of this can be seen in the convenience store, which is based on a real location that they recreated for the film, shelf by shelf. Every item was rendered, designed, or drawn individually. The whole process took the team 10 months and 600 textures to create. It's a sequence that plays with the falsity of reality. While these 2D drawings move through 3D dioramas, it creates an uncanniness, which is often used to Innocence's advantage. CGI can be divisive, especially among anime fans who were never inherently fans of 3D animation in the first place. Even today, there can be a tension over how fans view CGI in anime. I'd say that's particularly apparent in English-speaking communities. While Oshii wasn't concerned what American fans would or wouldn't want, he was focused on the Japanese release. However, there was a tension in Japan. It was right under his nose, in the production IG studio. It was the animators. They were a collection of some of the best veterans in the anime industry, some of whom who hadn't worked with Oshii for over a decade. Yet with such strong-minded individuals, disagreements were inevitable. Oshii had to take charge and keep the studio together. 3 years is a long production after all, and those cuts were not easy to pull off. The animators were exhausted by the end. It wasn't just the cuts though, but the animation corrections they needed to do as well. Even with Oshii veterans like Kisei, who was one of the animation directors, there were points where he would struggle. He told the director on several occasions to shove it. If he wanted corrections, then he could do them himself. In particular, Kisei was struggling with the timing of the 3D backgrounds. It could be quite strict because of re-rendering times. Once the background was set, you couldn't change the angle or the timing, so you were locked in. There are 2 types of animators on a Mamoru Oshii project. Those veterans who've been with Oshii enough that they understand all his quirks, and those coming in who don't really have a clue and don't really understand what Oshii's trying to ask them to do. Let's take Takeshi Honda, whom Miyazaki sees as the golden animator. He was asked to do several unconventional scenes in Innocence, and it was even a difficult project for him because Oshii's instructions were always vague, and it was tough for Honda to know how to approach anything, and I'm sure that didn't help with lowering morale. Even in studios which weren't animation. Art director Shuichi Hirata, who was particularly devastated by how much the convenience store backgrounds were obscured in the final composition. With UI or glitches, it made it hard to see the work the team put in. But really, the only thing that held the entire production together was those dedicated members of the team who did everything they could to put this film together. Including the animation directors. To manage this schedule, Innocence had 3 dedicated animation directors. The film wasn't just about sitting around and chatting either, so there were some real obstacles ahead. There's more action here than in the original movie, even though it might not be obvious at a glance, especially with that cerebral tone. But the production let them go wild with complicated set pieces. Innocence made it look easy by passing by these big crowds in the background while flaunting its new tech in the foreground. The film builds a slow burning sense of tension in its action scenes, setting up the atmosphere and potential for danger before erupting into chaos. The Yakuza shootout is violent and explosive. It verges on parody as Batou tears through the place like a one-man army. He even fights a cyborg crabman, which is just amazing. Yeah, it's a self-serious film, but occasionally it does have a sense of humour. Nishio was the head animator at the Yakuza headquarters scene. His animation director priorities were cuts where the characters were energetic. In the shootout in particular, his own style came through with those background goons. He's definitely having the most fun here. There's also something to be said about how the film hoards legendary talent for its action climax. Umetsu no Miya is running and kicking ass with flopping and flipping dolls, bringing back his puppet style from Gonsenzo-sama Bombom-sai like it was nothing. But what about Ohira's opening? It starts things off with a massive bang. It's so visceral. His style flows with chaos and destruction, just highlighting how monstrous Batou's augmented body is as it turns the deck into butter. Then animation director Okiura finishes off the sequence as it simmers down. He captures a crazy amount of weight in his movements, as well as managing a lot of the animation direction on the submarine. Takeshi Honda thinks his work was influenced by Ohira here, especially when it came to the Kusanagi dolls. No one quite understood how they should move with such disjointed action, so Okiura looked over Ohira's drawings over and over, and in the end, they turned out to have a little bit of Ohira's timing. The submarine climax is the loudest scene, but Innocence also uses scale to create atmosphere. The festival scene has a sense of poetry about it. It rhymes with the first movie's river scene. It's another orchestral moment without a word, but this time, it's larger than life, showing the difference in approach between each movie. Innocence is maximal in scale, with countless models, eruptions of choreography, even the music is grand. There's such a big choir that's filled up with at least 100 people singing. With the festival drums pounding, it's in these subtle changes that you can kind of see how it differs from the first movie, which was so iconic when it comes to its soundtrack. It would be impossible to move away from it, even for Oshii. Innocence soundtrack is an extension of the original. The scene may look like a celebration, but there's something uneasy about the whole thing. The cultural divide is apparent in this new land. It's a land of dolls and masked figures, where there's no distinction between person and prop, between living and the dead, foreshadowing its conclusion around the concept of dolls. This new location is a bit like a trip to the underworld for these detectives, and there's no guarantee they can escape. Hello, we're going to take a small break just for a second to talk about this series. This is part of the Mamoru Oshii series I've been making. We're almost, I guess, coming towards the end. I don't know, we've got a couple videos left to go. But it's a series that really can only be supported by my patrons. Some of these videos kind of like up and down. I mean, the last one really flatlined, and I don't really know why, but I appreciate everyone who has supported the project so far and kept it running along the way. It hasn't been easy, but I have nothing but respect for those who help out, and they generally get the things earlier. I've been doing some commentaries on these, and I plan to do a unique Oshii video exclusive to the Patreon by the time of the end of the series. So anyway, without further ado, let's talk about those patrons and give them thanks. D Fox, Gambaroni, Evan Reeves, Lloyd Miller, Lenny, Tim James Richards, Chunks, Fox Mulder, Paul, Steven's Mum, Systematic, Karen, Doji, Yegor, Vic Boss, DTB, Aleph, Mickey Moon, Pedro Ferreira, Waj, RJ Palmer, Kitty Cat, Oscar Britton, Giorgio, Luger, Ian Laser, Curtis, Alexandra Sovanov, Axel, Sat, Fury Curry, Mel, and J-Buck. Interpreting Innocence on a philosophical level takes commitment. Like Blade Runner, it has a deeper layer, under a fairly straightforward noir plot. Yet with Innocence, a good portion of the dialogue are quotes, so you can study them meticulously. Although I don't feel that's necessary just to interpret the film. If anything, the words matter less than the images. Innocence is a dream where the point it's making aren't necessarily logical, but emotional. Ghost in the Shell 2 is in part examining the tension between humans and machines, just like the Major was in the prior movie. Batou's authenticity is put into question, as cyberbrains are no guarantee. Are you any realer than a malfunctioning doll? After all, Kim's hacking turns the detectives into no more than puppets, stuck in a dollhouse having to repeat the journey ad nauseum. It highlights the absurdity of it all. Earlier on, Batou loses his entire arm, and now it's transformed into some kind of cannon. His flesh is slowly replaced, if it was ever real to begin with. The question of reality is a farce. It's just hyperreality again. That perhaps the only thing that holds true then, is that the things that make us human are the connections around us. A position the director came to while making this movie. Originally he thought as long as you had the brain you still existed, but age had made him reconsider the personal, the things that move away from logic. And then we get to the surrealness of the second half. Batou travels further down in the underworld to find his guardian angel, going deeper into danger, fighting against impossible odds for the chance of one more meeting. Not for the case, but for the Major. Did he get closure in their meeting? Did this journey change him? In the first film, the Major went through a clear journey, and we see the outcome. She found what she was looking for. Will Batou open up to others again? Well, that's all left up to interpretation, which you could say about many things in the movie. Just like the title, Innocence? What does that mean? Who are truly innocent? Is it the children in the film? Maybe not. There's an argument made in Macadamia Volume 3 that the kids are in themselves influenced by their environment and lose their innocence. The children went out of their way to kill, even if it was in self-defense. They've been corrupted. In comparison, animals and dolls are untouched. Well, that is until the dolls become living. As Motoko says, if a doll had a mouth, it would scream. Dolls become living and humans find out they aren't. It's kind of the cyclical nature of this movie. The girls are trapped in this inescapable horror of being an object of sexual violence. Those girls aren't seen to be worth very much in comparison to who they've killed. The Japanese state only has apathy towards them until they start killing their oppressors, which is treated with more scorn than the unrealized evil which trapped them there in the first place. These rich, dubious men who are looking for black market thrills. It's in their position in life, or rather death, that leads Section 9 to this case. The audience only really see this from a distance, in whispers and aftermath. You're detached from it, and you can't get any closer. To get closer would reveal the true horrors of the case. If they're dolls, women, or children, it seems like they're only mere playthings for the elite here. So the question turns to Motoko, a wanted criminal, a cyborg hacker, with her own sense of justice. In merging with the puppet, she found enlightenment, and also seems to be detached from worldly desires. So why does she come back now? Is it because this mirrors her own experience as a trapped doll? Is it because of Batou? Or is this even to do with her at all? Is it the puppet master who relates to these dolls? Turned living against your will to suffer? It must sound familiar. We aren't told their motives, and the Major as a character is still a mystery to us. And that seems to be intentional because the film's subjectivity is only seen through Batou's eyes. Someone who's detached from everything. And if he doesn't know the answer, then neither does the audience. Which I'm sure the execs were freaking out about. Where is the resolution? It's so unclear. Well, Oshii did have a response for that.
It's okay not to understand. People who get caught up explaining things usually just want to prove they get it. But honestly, most things in life are not understandable. It's not even a question of movies or not. It applies to life, work, and being alive.
He wanted an audience that would rewatch the film and find something new each time. So did that happen? With the theatrical release, did people go back and watch it multiple times? So was there that passion in the audience? Well, let's start with the American release. None of these execs in America understood the movie at all, so IG would be bouncing between studio to studio, trying to pitch the movie to them to get that funding. And only DreamWorks would really pay attention, and that was after seeing the pilot, but they did not like the script one bit and they wanted to change it. They wanted to change it all to be more in line with American tastes. So now there was a conflict within IG. Do we change the movie to fit what DreamWorks thinks is the right move? Or do we keep our integrity? Well, Ishikawa said Innocence is difficult for him to understand, but he has to trust Oshii. because if he dilutes it for an American audience, it just wouldn't be cyberpunk anymore. So DreamWorks eventually did accept the job with the original script, as long as Oshii, the director, took a pay cut. Yet the main thing that drew them to this project is the success of Ghost in the Shell 1 in the States. So they agreed not to interfere with IG as long as DreamWorks kept those distribution rights in the States. DreamWorks released the film in the US theaters through Go Fish, a failed attempt by the company to compete with Disney's Ghibli partnership. They chose anime titles that were darker and more adult, but they didn't know how to sell them well. Innocence was given a small subtitle-only release to about 40 or 50 theaters. Now at the time it wouldn't have hurt for them to go a little bit bigger, but it's not exactly like this is uncommon. This was almost a bit ambitious in comparison to other American releases of anime at that time. After all, we can look at Howl's Moving Castle, which was coming up the next year, which only had an American release of 200 theaters. I suppose we could say that anime was not the international draw that it is now, as we can see, and these studios just didn't understand how to sell it back then. Now, Innocence did far better than Go Fish could have possibly expected, staying in the cinema for over a month and grossing about $1 million, which was twice as much as the original Ghost in the Shell theatrical release. And it was pretty much on par per cinema with Howl's Moving Castle when it did release in America. So yeah, of course in hindsight they could have went bigger. In fact, if you look at the French release, which is in 150 theaters, they did roughly the same numbers as America in a much shorter period. And the thing is, Ghost in the Shell did not sell 1 million copies in France, and it seems that DreamWorks has failed to achieve anything close to that original film sales. Although they've never really disclosed the American numbers, but we do know their English manga video numbers. In 2010, Manga Video stated that Innocence had sold 100,000 copies in the UK alone, making it their best-selling DVD at the time, although there might be a bit of trickery there because double pack. This is the thing they did on both DVD and Blu-ray. They sold both films together at a cheaper price, so it was more advantageous for you to pick up a copy. So maybe it's not as impressive as it seems. But I guess that works out. It's fair to say Manga Video originally made Gits that juggernaut, especially in the States. Now if that was luck or method remains to be seen 100%, although they'd also wriggled their way into the production of Ghost in the Shell 2 through the original movie's contract, which stipulated that Manga Video must be involved in all future movies. They certainly knew this market better than DreamWorks did. And perhaps if DreamWorks was listening to them, or if either party was collaborating, DreamWorks wouldn't have picked such a nasty looking cover. Ooh. Manga Video also produced an English dub for the film in the UK and Australia, one which DreamWorks decided they wouldn't use, so it was a subtitle-only release, which was a pretty bad choice in 2004. It's fair to say DreamWorks just didn't understand the film at all, or anime. It actually took 5 years for Bandai to come together and make a dub for the American release, and they made a new one. They decided not to use the Manga Video one for some reason. I don't know, it was a strange choice, but even weirder, they used the exact same cast of voice actors.
When one's face is distorted, why should you blame the mirror?
The mirror does not help to enlighten, but rather to confuse, right?
Well, neither one of us are good looking enough to stare into a mirror. You mustn't find fault with the mirror when it's your own face that's distorted.
The mirror does not reflect the truth. It only obscures it, right?
Hell, the last thing I want to see in the mirror is your ugly reflection.
No, I guess if I had to speculate, maybe it was something to do with the royalty pay. They just didn't want to pay manga for the dub, and maybe it was cheaper to make their own. Maybe it's something to do with PAL region being different than American regions, and they weren't syncing right. Whatever it was, this all just makes the American side just look really sloppy and not very professional. Yet even in the ideal situation, they would have still struggled because the anime market had changed over the past decade. Not only had the types of works that were popular changed, Ghibli was rising to unfathomable heights. On top of that, the US video boom was on the way out. It peaked in 2002, and the market now became oversaturated and trends were moving away from darker sci-fi anime towards some lighter works. And that's a real problem here, is that Innocence was just not able to capture that momentum again. And some of that did have to do with infighting between different production members, including on the Japanese side. DreamWorks were not happy that Disney of Japan were handling the release in Asia, a choice that was most likely made by the co-production partner Studio Ghibli. In a funny kind of way, Ghost in the Shell is a Ghibli movie. A year or so into the production, Toshio Suzuki, head producer at Ghibli, partnered with Innocence. By this point, the movie idea had already been finalized, so Suzuki couldn't change a ton. He did have some impact though, starting with the title. He removed any mention of Ghost in the Shell in Japan, where the film is only known as Innocence. He added a song to the film, which is it's pretty nice. I like it, yeah. And finally, the most important part, Ghibli took on the marketing responsibilities for the Japanese theatrical release. Suzuki's approach was to remove the brand and create a director profile for Oshii from scratch, just like he does with Miyazaki, create that auteur figure. Well, this was an unrealistic approach, because it also went against what IG was doing to build themselves up, which is about capitalizing on the mixed media approach of Ghost in the Shell. So Suzuki's approach actually weakened their commercial strategy. And while Suzuki was happy to give up the 100,000 people or so who watched the original film in Japan, he wasn't considering the massive amount of sales that Ghost in the Shell standalone complex was having at the same time. So that could have bolstered Innocence. After the film was finished, producer Ishikawa ended up crying. Oshii recounted a few reasons that could have been. 1. After spending this much money, this is what you made? 2nd, he remembered all the hard work from the crew and it made him emotional. Or 3rd, though probably the most unlikely, he cried because he was moved by the movie itself. Innocence was a commercial failure. Certainly, that's its biggest problem. Its failures were self-evident. That it chose to be bigger and also more esoteric is an unorthodox combination for a sequel. Sure, they could have listened to those executives at DreamWorks, who told them how the film should have been created in their image, only for it to completely bomb and be panned like the live-action Ghost in the Shell. Luckily, Production IG didn't do that. I'm glad they kept their integrity. The staff hoped to create something that would last. The director acknowledged that the film didn't do well, but pointed to films like 2001: A Space Odyssey or Blade Runner that weren't box office hits and yet will continue to be watched and viewed for decades to come. Even within its failure, it was the highest grossing film adaptation for Masamune Shiro's work, which also did top the Oricon Japanese DVD chart for the first month, and the author loved it. Innocence was much more his style than the original film. After all, he's an Angel's Egg Oshii fan. He loved the bold strangeness, and he thought it captured his world well. It could be a polarizing film. Even within the crew, Okiura, the character designer and animation director, expressed mixed feelings about it after it was released, feeling that the process was sort of too splintered between different departments that didn't talk enough. And he also didn't really feel the animation was up to his standards. You know, I'd still say the film's a grower. Age has been kind to the film in terms of there really isn't many things like it. Even the style, I think it holds up because it delves into that uncanny element. The film was created on a computer, then transferred onto film, so the actual resolution is about 720p, which means there's kind of like a limit to it, a digital distortion that gives it that unique look, and I think that's part of the charm. And you gotta say, the actual staff working on it were bombshells.
And since it's virtually impossible to gather the staff that made Innocence once again, that movie will remain one of a kind.
20 years later, it's had a revival theatrical release in America, but the movie is still waiting to break even. It's one of the few in Oshii's career that hasn't. And that's a shame because the director has recently talked about his interest in making a 3rd movie. And that would definitely be impossible without the film hitting that break-even point. And I would love it if more people gave the film a try because I think it's unique, and if you're in the right frame of mind, I think you could really enjoy it. A decade ago, they did actually create a pilot for a potential 3rd movie. It was called G2.5, and the plan was to try and complete it as a CGI movie, and it looked like a mind-bending affair, only going further into that uncanny abyss. It's like a fever dream video game with its own virtual fighter sequence. Yet color me intrigued. I would have liked to know what was going on, as unlikely as it would be that this would ever be greenlit. And that's on top of Oshii. Could he handle another production like this? His health wasn't good during Innocence, and that notion might have stung a bit more after he completed it and became bedridden for months. Nishikubo says the director was more so involved here on all sides because of the nature of the project's experimentation. While Nishikubo usually handles the visual side of Oshii's films, this time Oshii was heavily involved there too. The director once said he aged all at once after Innocence. His body fell apart. At age 53, he was feeling it. It was at this point that Oshii decided to try and turn his health around and dedicated himself to learning karate. It was Oshii's poor health which inspired some of his thoughts around Innocence, that to be human was all about the connections you make. One day, an unlikely visitor made him reflect on that, his estranged daughter. I held her in my arms just a few times. She was an elementary school kid when I saw her last. She was a little girl in my memory. I never saw her after that. I relinquished custody, so I was not allowed to see her until she was an adult. I just gave her a birthday gift every year. She faxed me gift requests. She wanted dolls in her childhood, although her requests became more and more mature by the year. One day she requested a certain perfume.
I visited several department stores and finally found it. Only that list could tell me she was growing up. I decided I'd never ask her to meet me. I thought I deserved that punishment. One day she came to see me. It was during the post-production of Innocence. She was job hunting at the time. She wanted to become a writer, so she came to ask for advice. She came of her own will. It made me so happy. Finally, I could do something for her as her father. I utilized my connections and helped her, whether she took any of the offers or not. After Innocence was complete, Oshii invited his daughter to Cannes Film Festival. He wanted to walk her down the red carpet. Although because of Wong Kar-wai's production delay, he missed that opportunity. Oshii wrote, "Fuck you, Wong Kar-wai. Someday I'll kill you." After the award ceremony, they were free, and for the first time ever, they decided to see a film together. It was Jean-Luc Godard's newest movie, Notre Musique. Oshii had been a longtime fan of Godard since his youth, but his daughter may have never seen any of his movies. They both thought the film was amazing. Even at age 74, Godard was still able to produce something pushing the boundaries. With the sharpest editing, he didn't have the Palme d'Or, or a hit movie, but at that moment, he had his daughter. And his daughter said to him, "I wanted to see more. I wish this moment could have lasted a little bit longer."